Hi, Marie Filion here, and today we are talking about how learning occurs or doesn't occur. So the things I'm going to talk about today is memory has three stages. So we have short, we have intermediate, and we have long-term memory. And the difference between short and working memory, and how they improve the neurogenesis, which is the making of little baby brain cells, and then long-term memory, the breakdown of our systems, how to put information into our long-term memory, our 8 intelligences, activities that improve the different parts of your brain. So, short-term memory is defined as the number of items somebody can keep in their immediate memory. So this is going to be dependent on how old the person is, generally. So for ages 4 to 6, they should be able to put 4 to 5 items in their brain. So if you say to them, I want you to go brush your teeth, wash your hands, wash your face, clean out your belly button, and get your pajamas on. Hopefully they'll remember all those, but they might remember 3 or 4 of them. Okay, 7 and 8-year-olds, they should be able to remember the 5, and 9 to 11, they should be able to remember 6, and then over 11 should be able to remember 7. And adults usually remember between 7 and 9. So many of the children that I see can only hold 1 or 1 to 2 items in their short-term memory at one time. So that affects the ability to process reading, mathematics, interactions with others around them, and this includes not being able to handle stressful situations, as you can well imagine. So what ends up happening is we have what we call a high road and a low road. So information comes in through here, which is the thalamus, and generally if things are going the way it should be, they go through what we call the high road. So of course the cortex is our thinking brain, and then if we need to, we send the information, the alert, to the amygdala. Okay. Many children and adults, I guess, have information coming into their thalamus, and the 6-lane highway is actually what we call the low road. And so the information comes in, it goes through and processes through the amygdala first, so that fear center first, and sometimes doesn't even go through the cortex to do the thinking. So that can definitely be a problem. So working memory is defined as being able to manipulate the items that you hold in your short-term memory. So remember I said an adult can hold an average of 7. So we take those 7 things and then we do something with them. So that's working memory. It's the things that we do. So if a child can only hold 1.5 items or 1 to 2 items in their short-term memory, then being able to do anything with these items are very limited. Okay, so solutions to increase short-term memory and working memory. Well, I hate to tell you, it's practice, practice, practice. Okay, so there's an app that you can get on, usually we do this on the iPad, called Powering Up, and that's a really good one to help with memory. It's a memory program. There's another one called CogMeg, and you usually have to go through a clinician for that one, but that's really good too. And that's considered for children that have these serious deficits, and it speaks to resource teacher to bring it into the schools. If the school can't bring it in, then I can also help you. So memory has 3 different stages, or temporal stages. So temporal meaning time. So we have short, we have intermediate, and we have long. So short-term memory, so we just define short-term memory. So in the absence of rehearsal, so if we don't repeat it over and over again, short-term memory lasts about 30 seconds. Intermediate memory, so that's remembering items that have a more personal nature, like what we had for lunch yesterday, especially if it's very, very good. That can last longer, so 24 hours. Long-term memory, common misconception is that we only use 10% of our brains. That is false. We use many portions of our brain for different reasons. So long-term memory is vast. Learning one language includes knowing 100,000 pieces of information. So you can imagine if you know 2 languages. There you go. Multiple brain regions are included in encoding information. So it's not just in one area. So there's something, and a lot of people know what this is, but neuroplasticity. So it's the ability for our brains to create new connections and make stronger connections. Now, neurogenesis, and I mentioned it in the beginning of this talk, that is making new baby brain cells, okay, and usually in the hippocampus. So we want to be able to do that. So how do we do that? So cardiovascular, the endorphin, produced acting as potent antidotes for cortisol and stress hormone. So one of the things that we don't want to have is a lot of cortisol in our system because that destroys brain connections. So exercise, especially something that gets your heart rate up, that helps in getting the cortisol down, which doesn't destroy them. Diet, so we have to be careful with our sugar, okay? And so it has a real effect on our brain. Anything that is refined and processed should be avoided when possible. So the brain is 60% fat. And so the right fats are essential to healthy brain function. So omega-3, things like blueberries, green tea, and turmeric also help our brain. Practice calming methods. So the new cells are created, like if we decide to do memory work, and we've done this with children for a long time. So we pick a verse or a saying per day and we discuss it through the day and we just learn it over and over and over again. That really helps. Children under 12 need to get at least 10 to 12 hours of sleep. Bedtime really should be no later than 8 p.m. If you ask my children, when they were younger, they went to bed at 7. Exposure to sunlight. Children need to get out and play for sunlight and exercise. That's also very healthy for the brain. An enriched environment, so interesting and different activities. And that doesn't mean the TV, the iPad, and the phone, okay? So other things. And then again, like I said a little earlier, learning a new language is also another way to create little baby brain cells, or what we call neurogenesis. So areas of the brain that exercise helps. So the prefrontal cortex, so right behind your forehead here, aerobic exercise helps boost blood flow and dopamine in the brain, which is shown to help impulsivity. So one of the classic things about ADHD is they have a lack of blood flow in their prefrontal cortex. So that's one of the reasons why they are so impulsive. So when we have a child that has ADHD, we get them moving and we try to have them have at least 3,000 steps a day, if not 5,000. So another area exercise helps is called the deep limbic. So that's where we're social, we're joining sports team or dance club, horseback riding lessons, very effective as they calm hyperactivity in that deep limbic system and enhances your mood in addition to boosting the blood flow and multiple neurotransmitters. So neurotransmitters are just blood chemicals. Another area that exercise helps is the basal ganglia. So respective towards the progression of athletic development. So there's actually, this is a very interesting research coming out of Vancouver, Canada. It's called long-term athletic development. So it's the way in which we progress and we learn according to our motor ability. And if you Google that, it's very, very interesting. Fine motor control helps with spelling, as fine motor control is lower in the brain. Okay. Helps our temporal lobe, so aerobic coordination, activities that involve music, organized dance routines. Yeah, so here's the theory and you can just go with it. Also helps our cerebellum, so dancing, table tennis, coordination exercises are very effective for our cerebellum. So our cerebellum is back here and it actually contains 50% of the neurons in your brain. So it's a really important part of your brain. Okay, so putting information into our long-term memory. So here, right here, here's our long-term memory. So it's divided into declarative facts, so that's just facts, and non-declarative. So non-declarative is procedural, so things that you can do or show. So declarative is divided into two. Episodic, so that's personal memories, and that's where the emotions come in. And then semantic, so that's the actual words, right? So the episodic has to do with the cortex, frontal and temporal, so in the front and the temporal. And the semantic is storage in the cortex, so that's a lot. That's 4 different lobes, especially in the temporal lobe. So if we go over here to our non-declarative, so that's procedural. So how do I do that? How do I do things, right? So that's also long-term memory. So priming, use words we have just used. It reduces activity in the occipital lobe in the frontal cortex. Another part of declarative memory is called conditioning. So you see a dusty floor and you reach for a broom, and that's just, you've just been conditioned to do that, right? And that's part of your cerebellum, your hippocampus, and your cortex. Your skills learning. So you know how to ride a bike. That's your basal ganglia, and again, your cerebellum. So you can see the long-term memory is stored in a lot of places, a lot of different places in our brain. How to put information into long-term memory. So the episodic memory, so remembering things that are part of your life, and the semantic memory is remembering facts that you would have learned in school or now homeschooling. Combining episodic and semantic memory really helps in remembering facts. So if, let's say, a student has a lesson in geography, they apply it to planning a vacation or even a fake vacation, right? So if you actually act it out in our lives, it really helps. So rehearsal in one way or another. Right? The hierarchy of learning. There are times that one area of learning is not working because a lower portion of the brain is not developed. For example, there's a hierarchy in spelling. So fine motor control, letter formation, phonemic awareness, reading, and then spelling. So if the lower places are not set up, spelling doesn't work. So when our children have an IEP, so the individual educational plan, we need to be careful not to make too many adaptations. We need to strengthen the parts of the brain that are weak instead of saying, oh, that's okay, you know, they can't spell, we'll just give them an iPad. Okay, so here's the hierarchy. Here's an example of a hierarchy problem. So this particular upside down circle, or sorry, triangle, you can see the different colors. So the red is severe dysfunction, and then going up, that is fully developed, okay? And then here you have the brain stem, you have the diencephalon, so higher up, you have the limbic system, and then you have the cortex up here. So you can see in this particular brain, this is what the brain should look like at 8 to 10 years old. So you can see that most of it is developed. There's some underdevelopment, well, we call it mild compromise, but it's just because the child is not 21. So this is a kiddo that I had on my caseload, and you can see this particular child has mild dysfunction right in the brain stem, okay? So if we're giving this child programs that have to do with the cortex, that child's not going to be able to do it. We have to be really cognizant, really remember how developed the brain is, and sometimes that's why certain programs don't work. So 8 intelligences. We have spatial, and that's the ability to be able to move things around in our brain. So airline pilots, sailors, architects, chess players, they can move those things around in our brain. Some people can't do it. Not so much. Bodily kinesthetics, the ability to use one's whole body, parts of our bodies, in very creative ways. So dancers are really good at that. Musical. Okay, so musical intelligence, sensitivity to rhythm, pitch, meter, tone, melody, and timbre. So enhanced. So people who sing, really good at singing, music composition, playing instruments. And then we have people that are intelligent in linguistics. So sensitivity to the meaning of words, the odor of the words, the sounds, inflections. So a poet or an author, good example of that. Logical, mathematical. So the capacity to be able to think logically, Okay, so different symbols. So the famous psychologist, developmental psychologist, Jean Piaget, believed he was studying the ranges of intelligence, but he's actually studying logical mathematical intelligence, okay? Because he has a theory called cognitive development, developmental theory. Number 6 is interpersonal, so the ability to interact effectively with others. So people that are really sensitive to others' moods and feelings and temperaments and motivation. So negotiator or maybe a counselor. Intrapersonal, so sensitive to your own feelings, your own goals. You're very in touch with yourself, and hopefully most of us are. The 8th one is naturalistic, so the ability to make consequential distinctions in the world of nature, okay, between one plant or another. You really understand the ecosystem. Okay, so here's a really good way of looking at the child and the different intelligences, because sometimes we look at a child and we're like, oh, you know, this child doesn't have linguistic, doesn't have logical, mathematical. Okay, not a very intelligent child, but very, let's say that child is really gifted in musical or even naturalistic. And you're like, wait a minute, this kid is intelligent. So I think what we need to do is we need to look at where that child is intelligent. You start with the child's strongest and you stretch the child to explore the other areas. So what's really good in helping that child is a unit study that uses each of those intelligences, and then the child can excel and explore. Okay, always start from the strengths and then work to the weaknesses. So certain questions help me to look for the possibilities for involving as many intelligences as possible. For instance, how can I use the spoken or written word in whatever topic you're doing? In the logical mathematical, how can I bring numbers and calculations and logic and critical thinking into this? For the spatial, how can I use visual aids, visualization, color, art, metaphors, or visual organizers? For the musical, how can I bring in music or environmental sounds or set key points in rhythm or melody? The bodily kinesthetic, how can I involve the whole body or hands-on experiences? The interpersonal, how can I engage students in peer or cross-age sharing, cooperative learning, or large group simulation? The intrapersonal, how can I evoke personal feelings or memories or give students choices? And that's also building empathy, isn't it? It's like, well, how would you feel if you were in that situation? You won't always find ways to include all of them in a curriculum plan, but it's a really good idea to try and include as many of them as possible. Activities that improve different parts of your brain. So for the prefrontal, some of the things that are really just almost like without trying, right? It's like crossword puzzle, word games, memorizing prose, so anything that is written. The deep limbic, getting rid of the automatic negative thoughts and gratitude practices. The basal ganglia, deep relaxation, hand warming techniques, believe it or not, and deep breathing. And a lot of us know about deep breathing, but don't know that it actually calms an area in the limbic system, so the emotional brain, called the basal ganglia. To help the temporal lobe, we need memory games, naming games, and singing. The parietal lobe is helped by juggling and things like interior design. The cerebellum is helped by handwriting, calligraphy, anything, so you can do sports, horseback riding, all the different sports and activities that you can do. That's going to help the cerebellum. Okay, so thank you for listening, and if you want more information, please don't hesitate to email me. Please subscribe to the channel for more awesome videos, and you can contact me if you need consultation too. Thank you for your time. Bye now.